Hey everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I am Sam.
And I am Taylor.
So today we are jumping into a deep dive about a historical mystery that honestly just kind of blew my mind.
Oh, it is completely fascinating. I mean, it's one of those overlooked moments in history that changes how you view, well, everything.
Right, because we're looking at how one of the most world-shattering, foundation-breaking discoveries of 20th century physics got validated. And it wasn't validated in some sterile European laboratory, you know?
No, not at all.
It was halfway across the world,
But
in the home of an Indian poet.
yeah, it's such a beautifully weird intersection. You've got this exact afternoon, October 4th, 1929, where the bleeding edge of modern quantum mechanics basically collides head-on with 3,000-year-old ancient philosophy.
Which sounds like a movie script, right? But to understand why this meeting is so heavy, we kind of have to look at the existential crisis that forced our physicist into that room to begin with.
Right, the existential crisis. So we are talking about Werner Heisenberg. He's this 28-year-old German physicist, and he's a towering figure in the history of science.
Yeah, the uncertainty principle guy.
Exactly. He had just published his uncertainty principle in 1927. And this math basically proved that you simply cannot know simultaneously and with perfect precision both the exact position and the exact momentum of a subatomic particle.
And this wasn't just a tech issue, right? It wasn't just, oh, our microscopes are sort of blurry right now, check back in 10 years.
No, not at all. That's the crucial part. Heisenberg proved, through really rigorous math, that this uncertainty is it's a baked-in feature of reality. It's fundamental to the quantum level.
Okay, so these concepts get super abstract really fast, so let's try to ground this for the listener with a visual.
Let's do it.
Imagine you're standing in this massive, completely pitch black room.
Okay, totally dark.
Totally dark. And you were trying to find the exact location of this tiny, incredibly fast-moving object zipping around in there, but the only tool you have to find it is like a bucket with ping pong balls.
A bucket of ping pong balls.
Yeah. So you just start chucking these ping pong balls into the darkness, and eventually one of those balls is going to hit the object and bounce back to you, and you think, got it. I know exactly where it is.
Right, because you felt the bounce.
Exactly. But here is the fatal flaw in measuring it that way. The very act of hitting that object with your ping pong ball transfers energy to it.
Oh, wow. So it moves.
Yeah. You have fundamentally changed its trajectory just by finding it. By successfully measuring its location, you instantly altered its momentum.
I mean, that is a great way to look at it. And if we take your ping pong analogy even further, imagine if the object in the dark didn't even, exist as a solid, definable sphere with a set path until the very moment your ping pong ball actually made contact with it.
Wait, really? Just to sort of blur until you hit it?
Yes. And that was Heisenberg's real headache. The act of measurement itself disturbs and basically defines the system being measured.
That is wild.
It completely vaporized the foundations of classical physics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, up until then, the scientific method was built entirely on guys like Isaac Newton and James Clerk Maxwell.
Right, the whole idea of the universe as a giant independent clockwork machine ticking away.
Exactly. Classical physics assumed physical reality was strictly objective. Particles had definite positions, definite velocities, and it didn't matter at all if a human being was standing there measuring them or not.
The scientist was just like a passive observer.
Right, like sitting safely behind a thick glass wall, taking notes on a reality that was completely separate from them. But Heisenberg's math took a sledgehammer to that glass wall.
Oh, I see.
At the quantum level, the observer and the observed are fundamentally entangled. You literally cannot extract one from the other.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there, though. Because, okay, he's a theoretical physicist. If the math works out and the equations balance, why is he having a full-blown existential crisis about the philosophy of it? Why does he care so much that the observer is entangled with the observed?
Well, because the math was telling him something about reality that his entire worldview just couldn't process.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Heisenberg realized that his own quantum theory couldn't be explained using our everyday intuitive notions of space or time or cause and effect. Western philosophy, the whole tradition that raised and educated him, it possessed absolutely no framework for a reality where the observer cannot be divorced from the observed.
So he just had no context for his own math.
Exactly. He was profoundly confused and really deeply troubled by his own brilliant discovery. It destabilized what he thought science even was because, if the universe isn't made of solid, separate, independently existing objects, then what are we even looking at?
Man, Which perfectly sets up the second act of this deep dive.
Yeah, it does.
So, seeking some kind of clarity for this math that literally broke his understanding of reality, Heisenberg finds himself, 2 years later, halfway across the world.
Right. It's October 4th, 1929.
Yes, 1929. Heisenberg is on this massive world lecture tour. He goes to the US, Japan, and then he arrives in India. Specifically, he's visiting the University of Kolkata, where he's getting all these huge honors. But he had a very specific request. There was someone he wanted to meet.
Right, so he is escorted to this place called Tagore. It's a breathtaking historic estate in North Kolkata, built back in 1784.
Wow, 1784.
Yeah, and it served as the absolute epicenter of the Bengal Renaissance, which was this huge flowering of culture and science and philosophy.
And he was actually brought there by a scientist named Debendra Mohan Bose. And there's this fantastic little historical detail here. Debendra is the nephew of Jagadish Chandra Bose.
Oh, the famous scientist?
Exactly. The legendary guy who transmitted the world's first wireless signal before Marconi and, famously proved that plants have physical responses to stimuli.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right. So the Bose family is acting as this brilliant intellectual bridge between the scientific tradition of Bengal and our highly anxious visiting European physicist.
That's such a cool connection.
Yeah.
And waiting for Heisenberg at Jorasanko Thakur is Rabindranath Tagore. We really need to underline the gravity of the man Heisenberg was sitting down with.
Definitely.
Tagore is 68 years old at this time. He is a Nobel laureate, the very first non-European to win the Nobel Prize in literature, actually.
And he's the composer of the national anthems for both India and Bangladesh, which is just an incredible resume.
Right. He's a poet, an educator, a philosopher. But the crucial piece of the puzzle for us is that his entire worldview is inextricably rooted in the Upanishadic tradition.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The Upanishadic philosophical tradition of ancient India developed roughly between 800 and 200 BCE, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And at the absolute core of Tagore's Upanishadic belief system is this premise that the distinction between the subject and the object, between the knower and the known, well, that distinction ultimately dissolves at the deepest level of reality.
Exactly. Let's just pause and picture this scene for you listening. You have a 28-year-old scientist who mathematically annihilated classical physics, sitting down in the soft North Kolkata afternoon light, drinking tea with a 68-year-old poet whose cultural tradition has been saying the exact same thing for 3,000 years.
It gives me chills, honestly.
It really is wild. Because in Tagore's tradition, consciousness is not just an observer of reality. It is an active participant in it. The Upanishads speak of this concept called Brahman.
Right, Brahman.
And Brahman is not like a creator god sitting outside the universe looking in. Brahman is the universal consciousness itself. It's the fundamental ground of all being. It's the unified field from which both matter and consciousness emerge.
So in this view, the separation between you as the independent observer and the universe as the independent object, it's a total illusion.
A total illusion, exactly.
So they sit down and they talk for hours, over the course of several days, actually. And from the sources, it wasn't just some polite, high-level exchange of cultural pleasantries.
No, they got incredibly deep into the weeds.
Yeah, it was a precise mapping of cutting-edge quantum mechanics onto ancient philosophy.
And the structural similarities are staggering when you lay them out. I mean, let's look at how Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where the act of measurement is an inseparable part of the physical event, let's look at how that perfectly maps onto the Upanishadic view.
Okay.
The math says the observer cannot be separated from the observed, and the philosophy says consciousness is not separate from the physical world it perceives. The knower and the known are the same continuous fabric.
Which, I mean, that non-separability makes sense when you're talking about a single observer and a single subatomic particle. But what really blows my mind is how Tagore's philosophy scales that up to the whole universe, which sounds exactly like the concept of quantum entanglement.
Oh, absolutely. Quantum entanglement is that phenomenon where particles that have interacted remain fundamentally connected, no matter how vast the distance between them becomes in the universe.
Even across galaxies.
Yeah. If you measure the state of one particle, it instantaneously determines the state of the other. It completely defies the speed of light and our basic understanding of space.
Now line that up with the Upanishadic concept of Indra's net.
Oh, this is such a beautiful metaphor.
It really is one of the most beautiful metaphors in ancient philosophy. So it describes the universe as an infinite cosmic web. And at every single intersection of this infinite web, there is a glittering jewel.
Okay.
Because the web is infinite, the jewels are infinite. But here's the catching. Every single jewel perfectly reflects the light of every other jewel in the entire net simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
Right. You cannot look at one jewel without seeing the reflection of the whole. The fundamental premise is that the universe is intimately, instantaneously interconnected, and the idea of separate, isolated objects is just an appearance.
That is a breathtaking parallel. The math of entanglement perfectly mirrors the metaphor of the net. And, that brings us to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics.
Right, which was developed mostly by Niels Bohr and Heisenberg.
Yes. And this interpretation holds that quantum systems do not actually have definite properties independent of measurement.
Meaning they don't really exist in a solid state until you look.
Exactly. Solid properties like location or momentum only emerge into reality through the interaction between the system and the measuring apparatus.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. How does the Copenhagen interpretation actually map to the ancient texts?
Well, it maps directly to the teachings of Advaita Vedanta and the concept of Maya.
Okay, break that down for me.
So Advaita Vedanta holds that the definite, separate, independently existing objects we see all around us, the chairs, the trees, the stars, they're actually a superimposition laid over the underlying unified reality of Brahman.
Ah, I see.
And that superimposition, that illusion of separation, is called Maya.
Okay, think about how modern video game rendering engines work. Like, if you're playing a massive open-world video game, the console isn't actually generating the entire universe at all times.
Right, that would crash the system.
Exactly. The mountains behind you, the city over the next hill, they don't exist as fully rendered 3D objects until your character turns the camera and looks at them.
That's a great analogy.
Until the moment of observation, the rest of the game world is just raw code. It's just a field of mathematical potential. The environment only renders into solid, definite objects when the player's consciousness or the camera interacts with it.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it, yeah. The Copenhagen interpretation basically says the unobserved quantum universe is just a wave of mathematical probability. And Advaita Vedanta says the unobserved universe is the undifferentiated ground of Brahman.
Wow.
In both systems, definite properties only snap into existence. The world only renders, as you said, through the interaction of consciousness with that raw potential. Observation lifts the veil of Maya.
Okay, hold on. If they line up this perfectly, we definitely need to clarify something for you listening. Did Tagore essentially hand him the physics? Like, are we saying the Upanishads essentially invented quantum mechanics and Tagore just poured Heisenberg some tea and gave him the mathematical answers to his problems?
No, and it's really vital that we are careful with the direction of the causal arrow here.
Right, let's be clear.
Heisenberg derived his uncertainty principle from the rigorous mathematics of quantum mechanics back in 1927. The heavy lifting of the equations was completely done 2 years before he ever stepped foot in Kolkata. The Indian philosophical tradition did not cause the scientific discovery.
Right, the math was completely finished.
Yeah, what the philosophy provided in 1929 was a much-needed framework of comfort. Heisenberg had this profound math that entirely alienated him from his own Western philosophical background. And Tagore provided a vast, ancient context where that math finally made sense.
Because it wasn't foreign anymore.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
Decades later, Heisenberg actually famously told the physicist Fritjof Capra that after these conversations with Tagore, some of the ideas that had seemed so crazy suddenly made much more sense. It was profound relief for him.
Because he realized that the concepts his fellow Western physicists were struggling so bitterly to accept, things like fundamental impermanence, massive interconnectedness, the death of the objective observer, these weren't terrifying new voids.
No, they were the established foundation of ancient Indian spiritual traditions. The cutting-edge math had basically finally caught up to the ancient mysticism.
Which is just a remarkable historical convergence, regardless of the causal arrow. A 3,000-year-old philosophical tradition arrived independently at the exact same conclusions about the non-separability of reality that 20th century physics reached through rigorous, brutal equations.
And Heisenberg came away from Kolkata with a much more settled, peaceful understanding of his own life's work.
But the story of this philosophical collision doesn't actually end in Kolkata. Because if Tagore's ancient framework successfully comforted Heisenberg, we have to see how it would hold up against the ultimate test.
Right. The final boss.
Yes. How would this Upanishadic, human-centric worldview fare against the most stubborn, incredibly vocal opponent of quantum uncertainty in the world? We are talking about Albert Einstein.
This completely elevates the story from like a fascinating historical footnote into the defining intellectual debate of the 20th century.
Oh, absolutely.
Less than a year after meeting Heisenberg on July 14, 1930, Rabindranath Tagore travels to Germany and sits down with Albert Einstein at his home near Berlin.
And their conversation was actually recorded and published in 1931. Reading the transcripts, I mean, it is a heavyweight title fight about the fundamental nature of reality itself.
It really is, because Einstein was the ultimate uncompromising defender of what he called mind-independent reality.
Right.
He argued fiercely that the universe exists completely independent of human observers. During their debate, Einstein actually used a specific example. He pointed to the Apollo of Belvedere, which is a famous classical sculpture.
Okay.
And Einstein argued that the Apollo of Belvedere is beautiful and possesses a definite form, whether or not any human being is actually standing in the museum looking at it.
Which feels like common sense to most of us.
Right. Mathematical truth exists whether a human mind discovers it or not. To Einstein, the universe was here long before us, and it will be here long after us, just doing its own thing.
But Tagore completely held his ground, arguing straight from the Upanishadic tradition. He countered Einstein by basically stating that truth and beauty are completely inseparable from the consciousness that perceives them.
Wow.
And to be clear, he wasn't saying this in a trivial, like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder sort of way. He meant it at the subatomic level. He told Einstein point blank, the world is a human world.
Man, what a quote.
Consciousness is not just a tourist visiting a pre-existing physical reality. Consciousness is an active, mandatory constituent of reality itself.
And Einstein simply could not accept it. He just could not abide a universe whose physical existence was contingent on human observation. And what makes this transcript so incredible is that this specific philosophical disagreement between Einstein and Tagore maps flawlessly onto the brutal physics debates Einstein was having with Niels Bohr about quantum mechanics at the exact same time.
Right. God does not play dice.
Exactly. Einstein famously insisted God does not play dice with the universe. He absolutely refused to accept that quantum probability reflected genuine physical indeterminacy. He firmly believed it just reflected human ignorance, like there were hidden variables we just couldn't measure yet.
It is the ultimate evolution of the classic philosophical riddle, right? If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? But they were applying it to the very fabric of subatomic reality. If an electron spins in a void and no one measures it, does it have a location? Einstein pounded the table and screamed, yes.
But Tagore, relying on ancient texts, and Niels Bohr and Heisenberg, relying on quantum mathematics, they were firmly on the exact same philosophical side, saying no.
The observer is inherently required for the object to exist.
It is completely mind-bending when you really internalize the stakes of that debate. You have an Indian philosopher pulling from millennia-old spiritual traditions and European physicists pulling from the freshest, most complex math ever devised.
Right.
Working from completely different methodologies and arriving at the exact same position on the deepest possible question in the philosophy of physics.
Standing completely united against Albert Einstein. It is, I mean, it's the like extraordinary intellectual story of the 20th century that nobody talks about.
It really is.
And what strikes me the most about all of this source material we've dug through today is how deeply personal the implications are. Like, the intellectual legacy of these meetings in Kolkata and Berlin isn't just quirky historical trivia.
No, not at all.
It challenges every single one of us listening right now to fundamentally reconsider how we view our own interaction with the world today. It strips away that comfortable illusion that you are just a passive audience member sitting in a dark theater, watching the movie of the universe play out on a screen in front of you.
Right. It demands that you recognize your own active role. You are part of the rendering engine.
Exactly. So we want to leave you with a lingering, slightly provocative thought based on everything we've unpacked today.
I love this.
If consciousness and physical reality are as deeply and inextricably entangled as both quantum physics and the ancient Upanishads suggest, how does that alter the way you step out your front door today?
That's a huge question.
Think about it. You aren't just walking through a pre-rendered world. You are actively participating in its realization. Every look, every measurement, every observation, you are entangled in the fabric of it all.
It certainly makes the morning commute feel a bit more profound, you know?
Yeah, it really does. If you decide to travel to Kolkata or elsewhere in India, we have a recommendation. Five Senses Tours organizes tours across India, which are immersive cultural experiences. You can email contact@fivesensestours.com. Note 5 is written as a numeral in contact@fivesensestours.com or WhatsApp to +919 845 677 446.